All right, everybody. We are live for this week's episode of the Safely Extreme podcast for the week of February 21, 2021. As always, we're going to be having a discussion about game design here, and I am Josh Placer from Game Wisdom. My co-host, as always, from Nexus Games is Sharky. How are you doing?
I'm messing up the echo in my stream,
Uh-oh.
but I'm good otherwise.
Feels like my room, like the lighting is like completely like weird here. Let me see if I can. Maybe that will help. There's like an annoying glare in the background, but we'll have to deal with it.
Well, the
But
lighting down here in the ocean is perfectly fine. I mean, you can see the crystal clear blue right behind me.
mhm.
It's fabulous. Sadly, the thing is the only webcams they have down here underwater that are not expensive have like 1 FP like hour, so you'll only see that one frame the entire time.
All right. We need like one like those. We need like a stream of like an aquarium to show shark back there. But we have another great week, and coming up this week will be our next roundtable discussion. So we are planning on doing. Hey, Soren. We're planning on doing our topic about kind of the social impact of video games on people, which should be a very interesting one.
The social impact.
Mm-hmm.
You mean the social impact from balancing?
No, that'll be for Tuesday when we talk with Tomo, Ramin, and don't know who else is going to show.
I thought we were doing the cast today on balance.
Yeah, we're doing Bounce today, but Tuesday's going to be about social.
Oh, I thought you were talking about today's cast was about.
Unless
I was like,
Tomo or Ramin want to show up right now.
I thought we were doing balance.
But trending, any big news happening this week? I can't think of anything else. I'm still working on the book. I have, I think, about a little over 3 weeks to finish it, and I'm 3 chapters away from getting done. So, fingers crossed, I can get it all finished.
Well, there's the news of Blizzard is doing a remake of Diablo 2 now, which is absolutely huge because that was the best game they ever made and best game they ever will make, and I'm pretty sure this remake will be worse.
Possibly, considering the Warcraft 3 remake.
Mm-hmm. Although it's a different studio, a better studio making it. But the fact is that they're still under Blizzard's, guidance. And we all know where Blizzard's guidance leads.
Mm-hmm.
It leads to phones.
But do you have one?
No, I don't have a phone.
That is a really topical considering the thumbnail that I use for this one featuring Hearthstone on. Yeah, so BlizzCon happened this week and Nintendo Direct happened. I haven't watched either one of them yet.
Yeah.
What about you?
It's ironic you went for a card game because I went for a card game too. I went for the one we showed in the last spotlight thing, or the last Indie Inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
I went for that game.
I don't think there's anything else like news related before we get going for our major topic. Nothing's like singing out to me. Anything that you heard about?
Besides that, nothing noteworthy really that I've heard of anyway.
All right. So I guess before we get going then, very quickly, for those of you who are interested in getting acknowledgement in my 4th book, you do have just about 2 weeks for any pledges for that. It is $15 or more, and you'll get that acknowledgement. But I think with that, let's get to our topic. So we kind of went very broad this week, because game bounce can mean a lot of things.
Are you sure? I mean, it could mean like no things, couldn't it? It could just mean just be this abstract term that means nothing, correct?
Mm-hmm. It's everything and nothing.
Yeah, it's everything and nothing at the same time.
Is that safely extreme?
Yes, that is very safely extreme because I mean, balance is abstract in its core of its thing. It's the it's not even like, like this is the balance we're installing into the game kind of thing. It's more like just everything that it's put into the game, somehow becomes a balance kind of thing. Of course, that balance can be very lopsided, and a lot of times it is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many different types of balances.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should tackle that first, because there's the two main ones would be asymmetrical and symmetrical balancing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and like Shark said, like true like one-to-one perfect balance is very, very rare, if not borderline impossible to achieve with a game. And part of that has to do when player skill comes into the equation. We'll talk about that later in this cast.
Mm-hmm. But
But
game-wise, it can be done through a symmetrical
mm-hmm.
balance. But symmetrical balances are often boring.
Mm-hmm. And they don't necessarily work for single player driven games, because
Mm-hmm.
the AI is never going to get good as much as a human,
Mm-hmm.
unless we get to Matrix Terminator level.
And we might.
Maybe
I mean,
someday
maybe
the
we're
AI
already
will.
there. We just don't know it yet.
And to a pop music's comment, like fun and balance, I don't think necessarily go together, because there's plenty of games that are fun that aren't really balanced.
Mm-hmm. I
And
mean,
fun.
Hearthstone is definitely not balanced in a good way. And if you have all the cards, kind of thing, it's fun destroying everybody, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if you have none of the cards, it's not fun getting destroyed all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, even if you could define fun accurately, which nobody really can, we can kind of dance around it, kind of thing. But even if you could, fun is not does not have any direct connection or correlation to the balance.
Yeah.
Now, then, if
Although,
you were to talk about overall fun, across all players, then you'd be getting closer there. Certainly with the fun categorization, because when a lot of people are happy, because the design is because your balance is good across the board, then more than likely a lot of people are having fun.
mm-hmm. And we could probably use the topic of what is fun for one of our roundtable talks. So I'm sure like Tomo could certainly expand on that.
Yeah, that is certainly a Tomo topic.
Mm-hmm. And trying to achieve perfect balance is often where I think a lot of first-time developers tend to struggle with. It's up there with I'm going to build the perfect game, that title that's going to appeal to everyone. It's going to be game of the year. I'll sell 2 million copies and I can retire off them.
Yeah, I mean, I did that with my last game. That's the reason why I'm here. I'm retired.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not currently making a game. I am filthy rich off of my little sales from my last game, but not really.
Mm-hmm. And to a Rat's Tail's comment about imbalancing to an actively involving meta, yeah, and when we get to asymmetrical design, we'll probably need to touch more on meta.
Mm-hmm.
But to start with symmetrical play, this is where for a lot of like esports fans, they tend to, or esports players, they tend to, I think, laser focus on symmetrical balance. The idea that I have access to the same options that you do.
Mm-hmm.
But in actuality, esports games aren't as symmetrically balanced as they would like to say it is. And the big reason, of course, is that you play as different characters. If it was just all mirror matches, yeah, that would be symmetrical.
I
It
mean,
wouldn't be
some
all
of
that
them.
interesting.
Didn't Call of Duty that?
I don't know. I know people can buy different weapons. I'm thinking about Counter Strike. I've not watched too much of Call of Duty esports.
I know that Overwatch is definitely asymmetrical.
Oh yes,
Very
and League of
asymmetrical.
Legends and
Mm-hmm.
Dota,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Those are definitely.
Smash.
Mm-hmm.
Would Fortnite be considered symmetrical?
Maybe. But the issue
It's
with no, it it would be semi-symmetrical, I think, because like
mhm.
all of the players have the same, abilities and everything, and powers and everything. But the difference is the map is not a mirror of each other. It's not
Mhm.
like and not only that, but like since if you're in a battle royale mode of it, kind of thing, your wherever you drop is not the same as where anybody else drops. You would
And
have to
where
have.
items are spawned is not the same as well either.
Yeah, yep. That varies across the way. Rocket
Yeah,
League, I
Rocket.
think, is symmetrical.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the, the challenge about this is that it really depends on, I guess, kind of the market for it. Like going back to fighting games and even strategy titles themselves, that it is semi symmetrical. Everyone has access to the same, core move set, attack, block, jump, whatever. But it's the differences in how these matches will kind of tally up that go a long way towards creating that healthy competitive scene. Again, if everyone could only play Street Fighter as Guile and Blanca, it wouldn't be all that exciting to watch.
Yeah. Hold on, Josh. I gotta try something. Are you ready for
Mm-hmm.
this? Get over here.
Mm-hmm.
It
And then
it it it,
repeated
it worked.
10,000 times. And what we've seen out of the games that kind of blew up in the competitive space is having a lot of variance in terms of how symmetrical it can play. Thank you, Mojo. Like stuff
That-
like Team Fortress and we mentioned Overwatch are big examples. And I think what people look for when it comes to symmetry in this design is, can the play be reliable? As in, if I'm playing as Scorpion and Shark is playing as Sub Zero, I know what Sub Zero can do. I know his move set, and Shark knows my move set, and it's a matter of execution. If it was a case, and this is where we kind of saw what happened in Mortal Kombat 11, that MK11 and Injustice 2 introduced the idea of being able to customize characters. You can choose specific special moves to put on them, or you can choose the various parts that can affect how that character plays. And the competitive scene basically said no to that immediately and disabled all those features.
Mhm.
And that is kind of, I think, the extent of the customization that they want. They want customization, but they want it to be fixed customization. So specific builds, and then those builds are the ones that are chosen by NetherRealm.
Yeah. Now, what Mojo was reacting to was actually I went on the stream and when I did that, I moved your camera so you did get over.
And there's a reason for you to watch, to subscribe to Shark's channel as well as mine, because you get stuff like that on his.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like they do have an asymmetrical design with somewhat symmetric in it, and I think most asymmetrical designs still have symmetrical parts to them, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's this base foundation that everything else is built off of, kind of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
there's with asymmetrical, everything is different. But you try to get things, within a certain realm of fairness, kind of thing that feels in between them.
Mm-hmm. And Yeah, and this is what Nobody was saying earlier in my chat, that you need to establish a baseline that everything can stem from.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't do that, then that just leads to chaos. This sniper will do 10,000 damage with their shot. This guy with an assault rifle does 3. And maybe he has 50,000 health and the sniper has 20 health. Like, you need to have some idea of the bare minimum and maximum that you want your stats to be. And then that will allow you to tweak things accordingly.
Which this doesn't just apply to multiplayer games. This applies to single player games too.
Oh yes.
Like let's take for example an RPG. You have like a mage who has low HP, high spell variety, range damage, and it's normally very high damage. They're normally very much glass cannons kind of thing. Where you have a warrior that has very little abilities kind of thing, and he's mostly, he's sort of tanky, and he's, pretty dang strong kind of thing. And then you have, like, I don't know, an archer who, is ranged, has limited abilities, but, probably fires faster kind of thing. And, has more HP than the mage, but less than the other. And it's this rock, paper, scissors of, and rock, paper, scissors itself is a balance kind of thing. It's an asymmetrical balance.
Yeah. And another point is that if you don't have that, you may think that you are creating a wide variety of design, but ultimately you're not. Because if you have 100 classes and 99 of them are just broken in the wrong way, and actually you just have one class, because that's the only functional character in your entire game.
Mm-hmm. Like if you have a single player game where 20 classes and 19 of them suck really bad, and there's no way you can beat that game that way unless you're a masochist. And the only real way to beat that game is if you play as this one class.
Yeah. And we saw this with a lot of early RPGs that would throw, dozens upon dozens of skills, and most of them are just ineffective. Why should I, poison an enemy for 5 points of damage when I just hit him with a fireball for 800 points of damage?
Exactly.
Or the boss is immune to all status effects.
Yeah, but
Don't
he's
you
not.
love that one?
But he's not immune to damage.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've upgraded your poison so much you do I don't know, 500 points per second kind of thing, but the boss is immune to all of it.
Yep.
And good luck, because now you're just going. The only damage you do is the actual 1 damage when you hit him with the spell.
Mm-hmm.
You do the 1 damage plus the effect that gets canceled out. So good luck, 1 damaging them to death. Have fun.
Or the better part is that before you get to a boss, you come to an entire dungeon full of poison immune enemies.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, have fun hitting them with your staff for like 2 points of damage for the next 5 hours.
And trying to live through it.
And this is why, as we've said, you need to establish a baseline for how you expect somebody to get through your game. And this is where ideas of, like a progression curve and a power curve come into play. Because if you have a build that, let's say the final boss has 100,000 health, and this build can at most output 5,000, 3,000 damage, you may be in for some trouble. Likewise, if you have a build that can do 80,000 damage immediately and does that every turn, that may be too powerful. And one of the challenges about balance, and this is where we get into discussions about, roguelike and procedural generation, is that also throws balance out the window. For those of you who watch our stream last time when I was playing Gunfire Born with Thorn, that our weapons, like through some crazy combination of powers, we were just like mutilating everything. It was just like, oh no, this boss is very difficult. I don't know how. Oh, he's dead. Thor couldn't even get out the whole sentence. The boss was dead already.
Here's a question, Josh.
Yeah.
Have you been watching me play Disgaea? Because literally,
No.
my character, one of my main characters, doing 80,000 points of damage.
No, I just picked that number out. Oh, good. We're on the same wavelength again.
And my other one's doing very low.
But part of the challenge when it comes to balancing games, and again, I'm sure we are not going to touch on every topic in the next, hour and 30, hour and 40 of this stream, but when we're focusing, at least for right now, on trying to create some semblance of symmetry, you need to look at where that baseline is and then extend it from there. And a good example of that is the philosophy Blizzard used for StarCraft and StarCraft 2. That, like, one Terran Marine is equal to 2 Zergling. And I don't remember what the ratio is to the Protoss Zealots.
Mm-hmm. But they balance it in such a way that everything felt like it was equal, like it was a stair climb rather than a cliff face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Everyone, and this is where that kind of it's asymmetrical symmetry, which could also be slightly extreme as well.
Yeah, it is. It is.
That every faction in StarCraft has unique elements to it, and that is balanced by the fact that everyone has unique tactics that they can use. So the Terrans get the siege tanks, which no other faction or Zerg or Protoss get access to. But that's okay, because Zerg gets Mutalisks and Ultralisks. And Protoss get those very annoying Dark Templars that if you don't properly build that or have any kind of self-defense, say goodbye to your entire army.
I wouldn't say StarCraft is perfectly balanced. It's well balanced. There is no perfect. The only perfect in games is ones that don't exist.
Or, again, if it's just straight up mirror matches.
Yeah. I mean, you can have aspects of it be perfect, but not the whole thing. Like with my current game, I mean, the defense stats of everything that, the game plays is perfectly balanced. The other stuff is asymmetrically balanced.
Mm-hmm. And part of what makes this very difficult is that asymmetry doesn't have, it's very hard to put into word whether asymmetry is balanced or not. This is where, the whole adage, apples to apples, orange to oranges, that doesn't apply here. And it's kind of like, how do you tell what's more balanced? Being able to fly across the map or summon golems at will? Like, you can't just, with that one sentence alone, you can't make a decision.
Mm-mm.
It's how those elements and how the variables around them are stacked that can make things a little bit easier. For instance, if flying is simply an escape mechanism, it can cost maybe slightly less mana or power compared to summoning more units that can then help you in battle.
Mm-hmm. So, to play cost is, whatever it costs to bring it out is always a factor because, this unit may be, clearly weaker than this other unit. But, say this unit's, a 2/2, 2 attack, 2 HP, and this one is a 4/4 kind of thing. You're like, well, the 4/4 is clearly better, right? But maybe not, because, maybe that 2/2 cost 1 mana to call, 1 mana or 1 whatever to bring out, and the other one costs 3. So you could actually get 3 of those to the one of those, and which may depend, like 3 of those may not be better than that. I mean, it's total bigger numbers kind of thing and bigger quantity, but maybe only, maybe the biggest number wins, or maybe maybe it's a total that wins. It depends on the game.
And not only that, but let's say that 2/2 has a special ability on. Let's say if the map is on a swamp background, the 2/2 gets, 2 additional attack and strength on that specific field.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've seen, I think what's kind of become the common truth, is that numbers by themselves, if your entire game is just about nothing but numbers, that becomes boring. If it's a case of, I have a 6-6 and you have a 3-3, well, my 6-6 is going to win. But where a lot of the interest comes in is the stuff around that. Shark and I had a conversation about kind of the difference between Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone and the different energy costs. That's another factor that can be brought in. Part of the issue that Hearthstone had is that everything is tied to a singular mana. So they don't have the room to work around that in terms of balance.
Yeah, there's no granularity in their mana system, where Magic the Gathering has 5 different types of mana. So, like, where, Hearthstone is 3 mana is 3 mana kind of thing. With Magic, 3 mana is not just 3 mana. 3 mana could be, 2 red, 1 of any. It could be, 3 black. It could be 1 black and 2 of any. It could be 3 of any. It could be many different things. It could be like 1 black, 1 red, and 1 blue. There's many things that 3 mana can be in Magic, where it's just 3 mana in Hearthstone. So hence, there's no granularity in that to help balance out the system. So like a 3/3, for 3 mana, and a 4/4 for 3 mana, why would you run the 3/3 in Hearthstone?
Yeah.
Where in Magic, there's a reason to run that 3/3, because that 3/3 can come out with 3 of any color mana, where the 4/4 has to be, 3 black mana. So you absolutely can't run it unless you're running black. And even if you're running black, I mean, like, if you're not running all black, that's a lot harder to pull off.
Yeah. And before I forget a point I wanted to make earlier, that cost and weight are a major point about how strong you want to make something. Like, if we're playing a game and I want someone a spirit bomb to kill you for like 10,000 points of damage, that could be fine if the resource drain on that or the cost on that is extremely high to match that. And again, all these factors that you can put in become a part of the balance. It's not just about power. It can be about cost. The amount of time it takes to summon it, what's required to summon it. And all these are, as we've said, it is a genre by genre, game by game basis. Like, there is no such thing as the perfect balance equation that will solve every game situation.
Yeah. And if you went and threw a spirit bomb at me, I would just go Ultra Instinct and stop it.
There we go. Where does the Ultra Instinct fall in the rock, paper, scissors formula?
It falls in all of them.
Okay. And to pop music comment, Hearthstone has different hero classes. That is some level of granularity, but within each class, you're still dealing with the same mana cost. So why should I take a 2/2 mana or 2/2 mage character or mage card if I could also take a 2-cost 3/3 mage cost? And a lot of Hearthstone's cards, especially the older ones, seem to kind of fall into that period where they're just useless. They're just wasted space. And again, this will be getting off tangent, but in any kind of multiplayer-based game, you don't want waste or trash options in your game. There should never be choices that somebody can spend money on that are 100% worthless.
Yeah. Or anything that they can spend cash on to make the stuff that people get for free 100% worthless.
But again, that is definitely a topic for another day. When we go into multiplayer, that's a little too much. But anything else you want to mention about symmetrical before we get to asymmetrical?
Well, developers seem to not do symmetrical designs because they just most of the time seem bored. They are very plain, they feel very generic kind of thing, and there's there are ways around that kind of thing, but we're speaking in generalities as we always do on this podcast because there is no one right answer to anything in game development. It's like you should put a functioning keyboard in your game. There are games out there that don't have functional keyboards in their game. And they succeeded.
Volume sliders either.
Yeah. Some people, don't put volume sliders in there. Some people, like everything, even if you follow none of the generalities, then you can succeed. And even if you follow all of them, you can still fail. It's there's nothing 100%, but in general, the symmetrical design is boring, essentially.
Yeah, and part of the reason why we've seen developers get away from that in most cases, again, there are exceptions like Rocket League, and we'll talk about how skill factors in probably after asymmetrical balance. But part of the reason why, as Shark said, is that it limits the variety of ways you can play this game. If 100 matches can all turn out the exact same way 100 times, people are going to get bored of that. And as to Rat's Tail's comment from earlier about an ever-changing meta, that is one of the big reasons for this. And why developers will introduce sometimes monthly changes, sometimes seasonal changes. Because they know that when things are fixed, people will establish a meta for that. Even if there's 100 choices in your game, if they're all still fixed choices, one of them will always come out on top. And if one comes out on top, there will always be a number 2 that is the counter to that. And there is when we get to that fixed meta, which is the nightmare for any multiplayer developer.
And back to the symmetrical kind of thing, or why would I pick this blue player over this red player, over this yellow player, over this green player, other than I like the color better, because they're all basically they're all the exact same.
Now, of course, people love personalization, but that's, its own topic.
Yeah, that would that's boring kind of thing. Why, let's just say that, personalization is not part of it. You have no favoritism in color or anything else. Why would you pick one character in Among Us, for example, over another? There's no reason to, because they are all the exact same, unless they're imposters. In which case, they're very sus.
Thank you. You beat me to it. But speaking about Among Us, I think that's a good segue to asymmetrical balance. Because asymmetry is far more interesting. Hey, Gordon, welcome to your first Sunday show in, I think, like over a year.
Yep. Half of it, anyway.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, and create more about maybe more content, create more assets. Yeah, but asymmetry, when it comes to balance, is where we see a lot of the more interesting multiplayer designs and even single player designs as well. XCOM would be a really good example of that. You don't have access to mutons and chrysalids as the humans in XCOM. Although that would be a very crazy power to summon an army of chrysalids to infect the aliens.
Yeah.
And asymmetry leads to a lot more interesting choices. But conversely, and hey Chris, it leads to a lot more headaches in terms of balance. Because as we've said, numbers don't really apply, or it doesn't apply as much when we're dealing with unique powers. Now, to Mojo's comment earlier about being more mathematical, yes, and that is certainly an option. Again, Blizzard with StarCraft 1, I remember seeing them talking about it. So they balanced the unit stats down to the decimal point in trying to make things balance along those lines. And while that certainly helped, it still doesn't equate to utility. Again, like going back to my example earlier, what's a better option? Being able to fly at will or summon an army of golems? Well, it really depends.
It depends.
And
according to Chris, we're going on tour now. You ready for the tour?
Mm-hmm. Hook the stream up to like the loudspeaker in the store. Let everyone hear it.
Just pick up one of the phones and be like, just put your phone up to the phone. You won't get in trouble at all for that one.
No. And this is where, when we talk about asymmetry, that the big question you want to answer as a developer, what is the utility of this skill? If I have a skill, well, my voice is really dying. If I have a skill that, let's say, can turn enemies into chickens, hit a button, enemy turns into a chicken, they're out, polymorph.
That sounds like an OP ability, because then once you hit it, they're going to summon a whole bunch of chickens and you're going to be doomed.
Yeah. Let's say, So let's say I hit a button, I can turn any enemy I want into a chicken. That has amazingly high utility. But, yep, exactly. More things change, the more they stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I hit a button, I can turn any enemy I want into a chicken. That would be OP. That has ridiculously high utility. So let's say somebody decides to balance it and say, okay, instead of just hitting a button, you have to tap the button, to fill up a meter. And let's say that can take 20 to 30 seconds. Suddenly, the utility of that skill has been completely nerfed.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ilgar. And people wouldn't want to use it like that. If you have a skill that takes 20 seconds to kill an enemy in an ARPG, that's like 5 years in, ARPG time. And it gets back at that point I made earlier. If I can kill you in 2 seconds with a giant fireball, and all the other skills take 30 to 40 seconds, why the hell would I take any one of those other skills?
Yep. We're going on the milk tour, by the way.
Sweet.
Or milky. It'd be sweet if it was a chocolate milk tour. Do you have some chocolate for that, Chris? Can we go on the chocolate milk tour for the sweet tour?
So, and just as we said, I just noticed YouTube dipped for a second. YouTube must not like milk.
It must be lactose intolerant.
Mm-hmm. And this has been speaking about skills like that, this has been another one of those nightmares for ARPG design. How do you balance 100, 200, 300 different skills spread across, 9 to 10 different classes, all with their own unique gear?
Yeah, I mean, like, balancing is really a mess. It's one of those things where you balance it as well as you can. At least this is how I do it. I balance the game as well as I can in my head, calculating everything out, But, when it comes to asymmetrical design, there's many things you can't account for, and you have to get playtesters' hands on it to experience it, and you'll watch and see what they do, kind of thing, and adjust accordingly. Because I mean, it may not seem powerful that you draw a card, and this other ability gains 20 points, kind of thing. But it turns out that when you draw that card, there's a chance that card is going to not only take away 10 points from your opponent, but give you 10 points, activate a power that is also a draw card, which then you draw another card, which then you play that card, and then that card can, deal another, take another 10 points from the opponent and take, give you 10 kind of thing. And at that point, you've gained, 50 or 60 points, and your opponent's lost 30 points, because you drew a card kind of thing. Where the other one, they just gained 20 points. But on the other hand, is maybe that draw card is going to draw something that, does you no good for that turn, and you're just, done, And,
Yeah.
you have to, a counter and you have to try to account when you're looking at this for the highs and the lows of each power kind of thing, and the range of it to
Mm-hmm.
kind of zero in on how balanced such a thing is. And players will often say, such a thing is out of balance, it's too strong, or it's too weak kind of thing, which is important to get players' feedback kind of thing. And, you don't need to just go off of one player's feedback, because, they may be going from the point of, I lost, I shouldn't have lost, and this is what killed me kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or they may be going off of, legitimately, this is like, I stood no chance. I never did stand a chance because this thing was in their, deck kind of thing.
Yeah. And that is another very big point about the utility of these skills. If you have something, let's say you're playing a CCG, and you have a card that for 3 mana summons an 8/8, gives you completely refills your hand, and does 20 points of damage to the enemy, all with a single cost of playing that card. What would be the downside of playing that?
Well,
Why would you?
then that would be one less of the cards of it's a one mana cost, and when you play that card, you instantly win the game. I
I was
mean,
just about to say, no, there
it,
is 0 mana cost.
no, 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 no. The zero mana cost is, we go back in time to all the games before this one, and you automatically reverse time and win all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like, not just this game, but like, you won the entire tournament.
Mm-hmm. And this is again like getting to getting to what Shark just said about people saying, "Oh, this is overpowered. I can't be it. It's broken," and all that. You need to look at how your skills stack up to each other. Even if, again, we're dealing with asymmetry, you need to be able to understand: is there a counter for this? Like going back to my example about being able to fly, is there, like, if let's say flying makes me completely immune to melee damage or ground based units, do players have a plan B to deal with that? If there are no means in your game to attack flying units, well, you just create a massive imbalance with that skill.
Yeah, that's what Magic did with the power of I think it's Reach, where like
Mm.
they would have ground-based creatures kind of thing, but like certain ones would have Reach, which would allow them to block and attack flyers.
Mm-hmm. And again, you need to be mindful of this. I think when it comes to asymmetry and balance in this aspect, I go back to one of my posts I wrote when I was comparing game design to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where I said that good balance is about everything having its moment in the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Everything should be overpowered in the most perfect of perfect situations. Nothing should be overpowered in every situation.
Yep, or even most.
Mm-hmm.
Now
So,
then, you want to, but like, for example, like in a CCG, you want to have a reason why people want like rare
mm-hmm.
cards or something. But that doesn't
Oh,
have to be because of statistical numbers, or because it's, clearly better kind of thing.
that's also boring, and it
Hmm.
can lead to your game being decried as pay to win.
Hmm. Now, see, with with you, that doesn't mean your rare cards have to be, bad or equal though. Because like, you can have some really powerful cards in there with really powerful cost.
Mm-hmm.
You can have some, weak but slightly better than, the normal weak cards that are, the same cost as the weak cards kind of thing. They're this would be, like you don't want to do this very often, but this would be like, one of the times when maybe it's okay to outdate a card kind of thing. Like when you're given, like, okay, so your normal, 3 mana cost card
Mm-hmm.
is a, 3 attack, 3, it's a 3/3.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this rare card that is a 4/3 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you really want to stay away from that as much as possible because you are making it, essentially pay to win at that point. But it depends on it how accessible that card is.
Mm-hmm. Like if somebody can only get that car by, let's say, spending, I don't know, $500 in your game, people are going to be royally pissed about that.
Mm-hmm. But if they can
And
get that card at any time they spend, $2 or even $3 or whatever, and they can get it, you know, you know, and they could also not get it,
mm-hmm.
then it's more fair kind of thing. But
Yeah.
again, you want to refrain from that if you can. But I think a little bit of outdating is fine. Just don't do a lot of it.
Yeah. And one of the things that I see, especially from like gotcha and mobile style games along these lines, is that they will tie unique powers to specific characters. So, the SSR or the 5 star, however you want, whatever your ultimate, super rare rank is, they will often tie abilities and special effects to those characters that nobody else can get.
Mm-hmm.
And that definitely adds value to them, but it's also kind of sketchy in terms of its monetization.
Yeah, and
Uh,
what I like to do in games, specifically card games, kind of thing, when I'm designing them and like in the design of other games, I like games where the perfect balance of the like the perfect deck, basically you build isn't 500 rare cards or 60 rare cards or however many cards
mhm,
are in your deck, but rather something like 30 commons, 20, 15 uncommons, like 10 or 15 rares, and like, or maybe less than that, and like a couple of extra rares kind of thing. Something that you have a spectrum in because like these cards synergize with these cards better than the other rares kind of thing. And we've seen that in an old card game that, I used to be 7th in the world ranked on, and that was Dot Hack, the Dot Hack
mhm,
CCG. And in that game, basically to play a card, every card had different cost, and it would be very, very different. Like
mhm,
one would be spotlight 3 hidden cards, which the hidden cards are just like your, essentially trap cards in Yu-Gi-Oh kind of thing.
mhm,
Cards that are turned, on their face and back, and you can flip them whenever situations require, set for it kind of thing.
mhm,
Where others are spot like so many elementals, spot 3 water elements kind of thing on the board, so it has to be
mhm,
3 water elements that's on the board kind of thing. So they all had very different costs, but like the ultra rares were all super OP. They where like your normal cards had like 1 to 5 attack kind of thing. Where your ultra rares, the bottom of the barrel ultra rare was 6 attack, and there was some 18 and 22 attack ones.
mhm,
But where it was different is like this one, to play this ultra rare, you have to sacrifice all 3 of your characters and all their equipment that go on them, which means that you have no defense after that place.
yeah,
And it has 3 victory points, which you only had to get 7 to win. So like that would be half your victory right there. And he's very, very likely to win because he's so powerful, kind of thing. But the fact is now you're completely open to any attack coming at you after
yeah,
that, and like, other ones are like, like you've got to spot like 3 or 4 of every element, and getting all that on the field between you and your opponent is very, very hard.
yeah,
And like, the cards being OP, they also have an OP cost. And, that I think is a good way to balance kind of thing. It's not the only way to balance, but, it's a method to balance kind of thing in a way
mhm,
that is, good because like you don't want it to just be OP without any reason to be OP. You know, like
Yeah.
it needs to have a balance to it.
Yeah. One of the things that I like from some of the games that I've seen is that while you can have, 3-star, 5-star, how many stars you want on characters, everybody starts out very low in terms of when you unlock them. Like, let's say they all start at like 2 stars or 3 stars. And then what that does is that it frees up developers to make all kinds of crazy powers because everybody is kind of even number wise at the start. And then it becomes less of, I'm just going to put my team up 10 3-stars and I'll win every time. Because even a 2-star character powered up and on a well synergized team is going to beat that.
Yeah.
And it's better than just saying, okay, all the normal characters are 1-star, all the extra power characters are 5-stars. Why would I ever think about trying to build a 1-star if I could just get a team of 5-stars at that point?
Yeah. And you have to be careful about that, because like everything has you need to make cost somewhat scale. Or you need to scale something somehow. Maybe this card has, maybe this ultra rare or whatever is really powerful. It has a really powerful ability, but it also has a really powerful disability, or something like that. Like, it's where, like this does this thing that's really overpowered, but like the defect is once you use that, you can't play another card for like 2 turns, kind of thing. Or, and like your opponent has 2 turns to try to get rid of that card or whatever, get rid of that enemy in order to, counter your thing, because you've got this 2-turn cooldown that you can't do anything for. And, they have this time to respond. Or maybe, there's many different ways to balance games kind of thing. And, you just have to try to, strike this balance. And whatever balance you try to strike, I can guarantee you it's going to be wrong. But that's where testing comes in. And you test and you get it right based off of testing. Game dev is all about iteration.
Yeah, so that would be considered a massive betrayal.
I don't think it would.
And to build on what you just said there about having some kind of super powerful tactic or skill, part of where that balance again comes in, what are the counterplays for it? And the example that I turn to when I think about this and where it went wrong was the whole Miracle Rogue strategy that was in the first year of Hearthstone. And for those of you who didn't play Hearthstone or don't know what we're talking about, it basically relied on, I think it was the Gadget Tran, whatever it was called, auctioneer. And what would happen was every time you play a card, it would let you draw another card. So what people would do is, like, on their turn, they would play him. They would then start playing all like the 0 or 1 mana cost cards, just keep cycling their deck, get all the cards they need, and then overwhelm their opponent. And the problem there was once somebody started doing that tactic, the person playing the game literally, or the opponent, literally had no option. The only way you could beat the strategy was to either beat him before they drew that card, or, hope and pray that when they did it on their turn, they didn't get anything that they needed. But that took the control completely out of the opponent's hands. It's basically saying, I play this card, I now have a 90% chance of winning, and you can't do anything about it. Why even play?
Yeah. That reminds me of a deck I built in the Dragon Ball Z CCG. And basically, I mean, that game was fairly balanced and whatnot. But I found this one particular combo that was with my arguably least favorite deck, the Goku deck, because I'm not a fan of Goku.
Uh-oh.
But you know, I don't hate Goku. I'm just not a fan of him. I'm a fan of Gohan. You know, and I put all my expensive cards in Gohan, and he was like my sixth best deck. Ironically, my Krillin deck of all things, was the second best. And he wasn't getting pawned; he was pawning other people. But anyway, in my Goku deck, what happened is I had this mastery, if I remember right, that said all I think it was all Saiyan cards got to got a power boost kind of thing, which was very minor. And it, you know, I actually ran Goku name cards from like a very, very old set, like from like the very first Saiyan Saga set. You know, the old cards that were completely worthless, essentially, because it was just Goku's physical attack does a baseline physical attack, which is basically nothing. No pluses, no nothing. If used by Goku, can be used twice. And then I had a Goku personality that says, if you use a Goku named card, you can use that card twice. So, you know, with that mastery, I added like +2, I think, to it. So now it's a physical attack +2, and then I could use it twice, and then I could use it twice more, kind of thing. And because I had another card that says whenever a Goku card is used, that goes into the that can be shuffled back into your deck, kind of thing. And then I had a lot of other Saiyan cards in there that were all draw a card. And when you play this game, you can only have one card at the end of your turn, and you draw 3 cards, and then that's it. You know what? Unless you have a card that says draw a card. So, you know, I was just able to just, you know, once the combat got declared, I was just able to draw. They would have only a maximum of 4 times they can stop me, you know, if they had all stop attacks kind of thing, all blocks in their end. And once they ran out kind of thing, it's just like, I hit you with this small attack, I hit you with this small attack. And when you know, once they get down to 0 kind of thing, that physical attack, you know, instead of doing basically 0, it's now doing like 8. So it's like 8 plus 2. And then I'm sitting there, and every time I hit them, you know, for after 0 kind of thing, they're losing that many damage of cards off of the top of their deck. So they're, you know, like if I got them down to 0 and it's 8 plus the 2 from my mastery, so that one Goku's physical attack, that really stupid, very basic card from like many sets ago that nobody had used forever kind of thing, that card now would end up doing 40 cards of life damage on its own once they're down to 0. And they only have a 60 card deck. And then I would, you know, have these other cards that just do 3, 4, 5, and I would just keep on drawing. And I had never stopped drawing, because once somebody declared combat on me, it was over, because it was like, throw out whatever you want. I got block, I got a block, I got a block. You know, okay, my turn. I'm just attacking infinitely, and then you're dead. You know.
Yeah, and that actually takes me to another big point we have to talk about with balance. That gamers are really good at finding the weak points in your design. And if there are any imbalances in your game, they're going to figure it out, and they will exploit the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why that was able to be done is because when DBZ was making their game kind of thing, what they did is they didn't retire old sets. You could still use old cards in new sets kind of thing. Where Magic the Gathering retires them every 2 years. So they're not balancing with those. So the developers had no idea that I would be able to completely come up with a completely broken strategy off of a really crappy Goku card in the new set, with this really crappy Goku card in the really old set kind of thing. And, you know, like, they're both really crappy cards, but together, you know, it becomes OP kind of thing, especially with everything else that was in there that I could build off of. And, you know, it was just able to break the game, because I was able to use old, really weak cards, which is the reason why, like, pretty much all card games outdates cards every, so many years, every 2 for Magic. Because if you don't, then there's creates multiple problems. Number one, the problem I did with Goku was just being able to completely break the game and instantly win. And the other of, the fact is that when you do the balance, you're having a balance for all the cards that are in there. And the third would be is when players join, they're going to feel obligated now to buy all those other cards and have to get all those old cards to even catch up. And it's this, it's this thing that is going to negate new players from ever joining your game, because the fact is why would I join that game? I'm going to have to buy like 20 years of cards before that point to even be relevant. I'm going to have to spend, a couple $1 million to, have a chance at doing anything in that game. Why would they do that? They wouldn't. Hence why, not generally anyway. Hence why, in our discussion we talked about before about being, good to new players entering your game, that would fall into that, because, people, some people think that's abusive kind of thing, because now you can't use a card that you paid for. And if you couldn't use a card, yeah, I would say that would be abusive, but not being able to use it in tournaments is perfectly legit, because you don't want that kind of thing, But at the same time, you don't want to lock a player completely out of something they paid for. So you need to create another mode where they can play that, like a free-for-all or something like that, where, because players not being able to use the things they paid for is very, very bad.
Oh, yeah. And it's also one of the reasons why continued balancing in multiplayer-based games is a very risky minefield that a lot of developers fall into.
Mm-hmm.
That if you sell somebody this card that does 6 attack, 6 defense, and then realize after the fact that it may be a little too overpowered, but people have been buying it on that assumption, they are going to turn on you very fast. And it's very hard to make those course corrections. And why, if we're talking about multiplayer-based games, some developers will either wait a very, very long time, or they'll do the worst option and they'll introduce kind of an arms race. So character A is overpowered. Instead of nerfing it, we're going to release and design character B, who is the complete counter to that. Mm-hmm. But the only way to get that character is to spend more money or get lucky with a roll.
Yeah, you gotta love it when developers, create the problems and then sell you the solutions that then that creates new problems that they sell you a new solution for. That's great design right there. If you're EA.
Oh yeah, or any number of mobile developers.
Yeah, like King.
Mm-hmm. Now, with kind of asymmetrical balance, another thing that you need to be mindful of, and this will probably segue into talking about meta in a few minutes, is what is the long-term ramification of this ability? One of the things that we see from a lot of online-based titles is when you add in brand new powers and things that weren't in the game before, how does that reflect with what's in the game now and what's coming in the future? For instance, let's say I introduce a character, let's say 6 months a year of the game's release. This is the only character in the game that gets lifesteal. Lifesteal, as we know in a lot of ARPGs or just in games in general, can be very powerful in terms of keeping a character alive.
Mm-hmm.
So you put that character in the game, and then let's say all future content, you throw out enemies who are all cause poison or damage over time effects that would drain somebody's health unless they have lifesteal. Well, suddenly you just create artificial demand for this character, and you've kind of ruined the game for everybody else who doesn't have that character.
Yep. And Chris, hopefully it's not all mobile games, because my current one is going to mobile. So
is it pay to win?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely pay to win.
No, it's pay for chocolate milk.
It's milk to win. It's
There we
chocolate milk to win. There we go.
There
It's chocolate milk to win.
And let me see here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah. Even I remember that. I never played it, but I think I own like the original like starter box of it somewhere.
Yeah, it's still around too. Well, it's not still around. They did a remake of it that is around now, as far as I know of. I know it. They did the remake. I think it was 2 years ago. Three? No, I think it was longer than that. It was a few. It was a few years ago, and as far as I know, that remake is still around. I hope so, Chris. I hope so. My goal.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to see if I can execute on it.
Yep. And you need, again, like, what makes this very hard is that it kind of goes to what I'm worrying about in my book in horror. That just as there are no rules for horror design in terms of how you build a game around it, there aren't any hard rules for asymmetry because it is entirely up to the discretion of the developer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to create, never before seen abilities in your game? You can do that. But therein lies the problem when it comes to balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is no perfect balance. And the one thing I'm worried about personally is that we go and do all this testing and everything tests out and everything feels balanced and everything. And then we release it, because we only had like, let's say we only have like 10, 15 people testing it, right? And we release it, and then we get like a few thousand people's hands on it, and then it's just very clear that none of these 20 people or whatever, none of these 15, 20 people that played it had any idea of this particular strategy that is just so OP and breaks everything. That is a personal fear of my current game.
Yep. And it's something as a developer that you by yourself, you're never going to be able to do this. You will never be able to perfectly balance your game by yourself without anyone playtesting. Even if you do have, dozens, if not hundreds of people playing your game around the clock, it may not still be able to be balanced. Because like we just said, the point about asymmetry is that there is no perfect balance.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do achieve perfect balance, then oftentimes that's just a boring game.
Yeah, and all it takes is one person to think of one thing that nobody else thought of. And it may take 100,000 people to get that one person in there, but once he thinks of it and he enacts it, then people see it, and then they start acting on it and copying, seeing how his deck works, and then they start copying it. And then when those people copy it, other people see it, and those people copy it, and over time they copy the same deck over and over until it becomes the new meta kind of thing. And if that one guy thought up this one strategy that is just unbeatable kind of thing, that the game was perfectly balanced until he came up with that one thing can just vastly throw off everything. And it may take you may have 999,999 people in your game, and the game's perfectly balanced. But when that one person drops right at the, whatever 10,000, 1 million mark or whatever, when that one guy joins kind of thing, and he thinks of that strategy, your balance is thrown out the window. Because there's only one way to win at that point, and that's to do that. But if somebody else sees that deck and then they figure out a way to beat it kind of thing, then they can build a deck that is the exact counter of it, and then it throws that deck underneath the water. And then if there's a, like, if everybody, what you want is ideally that wouldn't happen to that scale. That they would get a really strong deck, but it wouldn't be unbeatable kind of thing. And somebody would be able to counter it. And then somebody would be able to counter that counter. And then somebody would be able to counter that counter. And you have this rolling meta You know, where people countering one to counter another to counter another to counter another.
Hmm. And that, I think, is the perfect segue into talking about metagame when it comes to balance. Because part of this, as Charles just said, is that the second somebody finds an OP build or an OP strategy in any game, they're going to tell people about it. I mean, why wouldn't they?
Well, they might keep it to themselves so they can only be the ones who win.
True. Well, for a lot of YouTubers and streamers, they're going to make videos about it. And those videos are going to get out. And then that information is going to trickle down to all the other players. And if everybody knows that card A or faction B or whatever you want to say is the best one, people are going to use that.
Or if they know it's a counter for another one.
Yeah. And again, this is what we were saying earlier. If you have 50 classes in your game and only 3 of them were actually viable, you really only have 3 classes in your game. And that can lead into this nightmare scenario for developer, especially multiplayer. This is where I think the conversation kind of starts to focus more on multiplayer design. That the metagame, and for those of you who don't know what the term means, because it's been used in various forms, metagame refers to the kind of, what's hot, what's not. It's the playing the game without playing it. What is the most popular option? What is the least popular option? Who's the best? Who's the worst? That kind of thing. And single player games can certainly have their own meta to them, but it's not as damning when we talk about a multiplayer based game, especially if you have competitive play.
And, that meta, ideally, you want a balance that is balanced enough that when a meta comes out, it doesn't just completely destroy everything else. But you do want metas to come out. Yep. And then you want a new meta to come out to beat that meta. And then you want a meta to come out to beat that meta. And you want, new metas to continuously come out to beat the other ones. And you never want one of them to stay stagnant. You want this roll. And you want it to never be like this meta. Once it comes out, there's no beating it.
But here's the other challenge. You have to do that without having to massively change the options in your game each time. And again, like right now, a few dozen developers just got a huge migraine at that thought, what I just said.
And you got to do it without playing the game.
There you go. And without even looking at a computer. And without getting chocolate milk.
Yeah.
And as Shark said, meta, like constantly, you want your meta to shift. But in the same vein, as we said earlier, there still needs to be some semblance of balance. It shouldn't be month 1, let's say, fire cards completely overpowered. Month 1, week 2, fire cards are completely useless, never use them. Month 1, week 3, lightning is now the new meta.
Yeah. So, Chris, what you can do is you can get the one thing of milk and then get some chocolate mix or, syrup or something, and you got your chocolate milk.
Is that an advanced play? Is that advanced chocolate milk strategy?
Yes, that is advanced chocolate milk strategy.
Speed run it.
Well, if he speed runs, he might trip to the grocery store, and they might actually kick him out.
Yeah.
Meta milk.
There we go. And we got something there. And I guess for you, I want to put a little spotlight on you here, Shark. For Neon Continuum, what kind of time frame are you thinking about in terms of shifting the meta for Neon Continuum?
Well, I hope the meta will shift on its own through gameplay every set. So, never one set will be stagnant of, this is the one meta for that set. But hopefully every 3 months, we're going to be releasing a new set to add to it. And probably every 2 years we're going to be retiring cards from tournament play. Probably something about like that. So like things should be shifting every few months based off of that, but at the same time, hopefully things are shifting more than that through gameplay. Through players coming up with new strategies because somebody make I hope somebody comes up with a really good deck to play, let's say a cyberpunk deck, and then somebody finds the counter to that and it's this time travel deck, and then somebody finds the counter to that and it's this machines deck, and somebody finds the counter to that and it's this sci-fi military deck, and then somebody finds the counter to that with the alien deck, and then somebody finds the counter to that with a cyberpunk and comboed with a sci-fi military deck, and hopefully that will keep on rolling without us releasing another set kind of thing in that hopefully 3 months. No promises. 3 months for a new set is very, very scary for me, but it's something I know we need, so it's what we're going for, but it's very scary. I don't know if we're going to be able to pull it off, but let's assume that I am. It's something that I'm very, I hope is taking place without me releasing a new set.
Yeah. And to nobody, one, thank you for the super chat, and two, one way how not to balance it, unfortunately, is to give money via super chat.
Yeah.
And like to what you were saying there regarding the Continuum, that one of the challenges with when we talk about this in terms of meta is that there has to be something new. Whether that something new is completely overpowered or just okay, it doesn't matter. But you need to have constant or consistent, I should say, new content coming in. Because without it, again, people will figure this out. Even if you don't know, even if you have no idea what is the best option in your game, your fans and your hardcore players are going to do that.
They're going to find it.
They will. And again, this is not us, being hyperbole or making a joke. Gamers are really, really good at breaking games, as we've seen from the speedrunning community.
As we've seen from your streams.
I do it sometimes unintentionally, but I will break a game. Optimal monetization model. That's a good question, nobody. Again, part of this challenge, and when we get into pay to win, that's another topic, is that it's not black or white. It's different. It's shades of gray. There's different degrees of how much pay to win or how much money can impact these games.
Yeah, and every game has some pay to win to it. For example, Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire has an element of pay to win because if you don't pay for the game, you can't win it. Every game has some element of pay to win, and it's pretty much every game has some element of abusive, practices. Like any game that has 99 cents at the end, that's an abusive practice. But the thing is that abusive practice has become so normal that if you go outside of it, you're screwing yourself. And it's this balance of, if you want to do good for your game and you want to do, the right thing, you have to do some of the bad things, sadly, because like if you don't, then your game's going to fail, nobody's going to hear about it, and you did nothing for the industry.
But if you do too many bad things, then people will call it pay to win as an exploit, and then the word gets out and nobody plays your game. And like for myself, and I don't know if I'm in the outlier or an exception to this, I prefer direct purchases, as in I give you X amount of money, I get X thing in return. I don't like loot boxes and banner rolls. I know they're a necessary evil for a lot of these games, but I would prefer, if I spend like like in one of the games I was playing, Illusion Connect, it was basically give us $15 and we will give you, 5 free pools every week for, the end of time, as long as this game is out there. And
Yeah.
to me, I felt that was a really solid purchase because it's a guarantee. It's a one-time purchase.
Well, here's a question for you, Josh.
Yep.
Throwing you under the bus now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the gameplay model of the Magic the Gathering, like physical or digital, because they're kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
You buy cards, you get set rarities, you get set value in your packs. But it's random stuff in the packs, kind of thing. But they're all set value. That all goes to the gambling commission.
I think that's better. It's not something that I personally like. Again, I like direct purchases,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think it is fair. I know the next example you were going to say would be something like Hearthstone, where they just throw everything, into a big old pie and then, shuffle it around, give it to you.
Yeah, it's purely a loot box versus
Yeah.
a card pack in Magic the Gathering.
And to Chris's comment, that's what people were arguing. They were saying Diablo was the original loot box. And don't forget surprise mechanics.
Yeah. The sad thing is now if you tell somebody the difference between a card pack and a loot box kind of thing, like we just did with Hearthstone and Magic, people will be like, so it's surprise mechanics then. No.
There's that pain in my chest.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to be experiencing that pain a lot when I release the Continue.
Start preparing for it now. And what time can you play? Yeah. And again, people were arguing me that Diablo 3 is just like a mobile game. No, it's not.
No, the other Diablo is though, because you have to have a phone to play it.
Yeah. So here's my question for you, Charlie. We're flipping the bus, throw under the bus today. What do you think about games that allow you to either do a 1 pull or 10 pull on a banner? But what they'll say is that when you do a 10 pull, it automatically guarantees something. Whereas if you do 10 individual pulls, it does not.
I think that's abusive.
Yeah.
I think that you should definitely get that guarantee on the 1 pulls too, but you have to do 10 to do that. Now, the last mobile game I played, the Bleach one, it did that exact thing, because, the 10 would be guaranteed, but the 1 would also be guaranteed once you got it up to 10.
Yeah, I think I like that. Speaking about monetization models, we're kind of getting off track, but this is the last one I'll mention, and we'll get back on. What do you think about games that do that? I think it's called a step up, where you have to spend increasingly amounts on these purchases, but when you hit these thresholds, it'll give you some kind of super reward for doing it.
Are you talking about basically a pity prize?
Not so much pity, but it's kind of there's different steps. Like step 1, roll, spend 500 currency and we'll give you X. Step 2, spend 1,200 currency, we'll give you this bundle. Then spend 1,700 currency, we'll give you this bundle.
I mean, depending on how it's implemented, it might be good, but it also might be bad, kind of thing. Like if you're talking about a VIP model where you're giving players benefits over power over the other players, that would be bad. Where if it's this progressive thing where it's you're getting these extra small rewards kind of thing for continuing to support the game, that could be a good thing. So it depends.
And also, very quick point, if you sell or lock quality of life features to a paywall in your game, that is very bad. Through MMR. What's a MMR? I don't think I... And thank you again. Do you know what he's mean by MMR?
No.
Matchmaking could be?
I don't think so.
Because the term, I tried to look it up really fast, and people are describing it as either matchmaking or loot box.
That's very different things.
Yeah, I know. Matchmaking rating. Oh yeah, and that would take us to the discussion about skill,
Mm-hmm.
which I think skill will be our final. Like, I think that's a good final topic for this. Before we get to that, anything else you want to talk about in terms of asymmetry?
There is no perfect asymmetric games.
Mm-hmm.
There are only ones that well, there are ones that can be very easily exploited and have very clear ways to win, and there are ones that are not so clear and are, when they are found, there are counters to them, and then there's counters to those
Mm-hmm.
counters.
Yeah.
And you want this, you want the counters to the counters. You don't want the clear win. And the thing is if you're going to keep on adding content, for example, it's a live service, or you're just doing continuous updates to the
Mm-hmm.
thing, then you're going to have to be careful and make sure to outdate certain content at a certain point where it drops off, which is a problem because the thing is like we talked about before, about nobody likes, not being able to get a thing, kind of thing. So you still have to offer it, and you still have to offer something to do with it. It just can't be in your main thing. So it has to be like a side mode or something like that where you
Mm-hmm.
put the things. So just be very careful about that.
Yeah.
And it's like, you wouldn't necessarily, Magic doesn't necessarily have to drop out, you know,
Mm-hmm.
every, a set every 2 years kind of thing, or a set every year kind of thing. But they do it as a risk mitigation, because they know that if they don't, then something wrong, something bad is going to happen at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, with that, let's get to the final section for our topic for today. Uh, okay. Yeah. And that is when skill comes into the play when it comes to balance. Because skill throws everything that we've spent the last hour and a half there almost talking about completely out of balance as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is where things get very tricky. Sharks brought up several examples about playing various deck games and figuring out the best strategies for using these cards. The cards themselves, in the hands of a skilled player, and a novice player, or a grandmaster player, they're not changing their utility. But how somebody plays them can certainly, and even if we're even talking about games like Dota or Guns and Call of Duty or anything like that, the right item or the right tactic in a skilled player's hand can be very different in a novice. I remember I spoke to when I spoke to the developer who worked on Duelist, who mentioned that they were big in Netrunner, and they basically figure out using the right combination of cards that they completely broke the entire game, and they took that to a grand tournament with it. Like, that's an example of that. Everyone has access to the same abilities or the same tactics, but how somebody uses them is different. And this is where we get to a very, very tricky and I think, polarizing question. I'm curious what you think about this, considering that you're doing a lot, obviously, with balance with Neon Continuum.
Mm-hmm.
That there's this consensus that a good player should be able to win 50% of the time of their matches, regardless of, if I'm using your counter, you're using my counter. I just don't know if that's really attainable. I just want to see what you think about that.
I, I wouldn't say they wouldn't win 50% of the time, but like, I don't know what their win rate would be.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, one of their win rates might be 80%, the other one might be 40. But that doesn't mean the 40 is a bad player. The 40 could
Mm-hmm.
legitimately be better than the 80. But, the fact is matchmaking, you could, depending on how the matchmaking goes, you know, I mean, Call of Duty had this, I think it was Call of Duty, if I remember right. One of those first-person shooters along that lines had a system in there to where it would take the pay-in players who just bought the latest and greatest weapon kind of thing, and they would pair them against the weakest players in order to, you know, give the players that bought it this sense of power and joy of, you know, being OP kind of thing, at the same time as owning a bunch of noobs kind of thing, you know, and then they're like, oh, damn, I need to buy that gun. That gun is awesome.
Yeah.
And
didn't either EA or Activision try to trademark that?
I think so. I think somebody did, but, you know, tried to anyway. But like they, you know, but at the same time, there's other matchmaking methods where you're taking two players of, you know, equivalent skill or as close as you can measure to equivalent skill, because there's never no true measuring that kind of thing. And you're pushing them against each other. And that's the method I'm going to go with. You know, I'm going with the method of, you know, because I think the best thing for my card game, the word of the day, Neon Continuum, you know, my thought is that the best way to make that game fun is where every game is, I don't know if I'm going to win until the very end. You know, you may think you're going to win, but then, you know, things get completely turned around because somebody draws a heart of the cards. You know, that happened to you on that second match you played, because you were getting stomped. You were like, I think you were playing against something, or one of our playtesters, and I think something had like 14 points, and you had to get like 13 to win, you know, at the end, you know, and you had like, I think like 8. So, like, he was already 1 point over winning kind of thing. And then you pulled a heart out of the card. You know, it was like there was 1 or 2 spaces left on the board. You pulled a heart of the cards, pulled up one of his units, or pulled up one of your units, placed one down, took over 4 of his, reducing his points by 4, getting you 4 points, which brought you up to 12 and him down to 10. And then you placed 2 other cards in the other thing, and you, like, won with, like, 16 to, like... 8 or something.
I hope you recorded that play.
Well, I mean, it's on your video.
Yeah.
Anybody can see him play the old version. It's under Project Triad before he got its own new name, and it has the old crappy proxy art. But it was a really good match, and you know, I want it to be where, you know, you think, you know, you may be losing kind of thing, but you can pull out a win at the end kind of thing.
Yeah. And conversely, when I played Hearthstone, I got paired with somebody, like, it was like during my first like 2 weeks of playing the game, who had like literally every legendary card in his deck. So like every turn he played a new legendary, and all my tactics just didn't work. And again, that's the opposite of what you want in your game, where, you know, you don't know until you win until the very end. In that case, it was basically I lost before I even sat down and started playing the game.
Yeah. And, you know, I have several ideas of how I'm going to do that. I'm going to basically do what they said about the MMR, you know, the multiplayer rating, or whatever that stands for exactly. But, like, it's going to be where every player gets a rating based off of how they win, lose kind of thing. But at the same time, we're going to do a second layer of kind of the same thing, but different to every deck they make in Neon Continuum. So every deck will have its own rating. So if you make a new deck, it has a rating of 0 kind of thing. Now, if it's a copy of an old deck that is edited, now it has a similar rating but lower kind of thing to the original. Because it's like, we have a baseline for this. We know that he's changing cards out of this. So it's not 100% foolproof or anything. But we'll give him a prorated, like maybe 80% of what that original rating was for this one, to kind of give him, you know, kind of the ballpark of where we think he's going to be at. And, you know, at the same time, when a new set comes out, there's going to be a new player rating, a new deck rating, you know, and all that for, well, the new deck ratings every deck they build, but, you know, there's going to be a new player rating for every set. But that player rating is going to be based off of the old player rating. And the player ratings can go up or down, kind of thing, based off of performance and whatnot. And, I'm just trying to get it to where everybody is, we get those really. I want every game to be a nail-biting finish, I want nobody to know if they're going to win. And, just fighting their hardest to win, kind of thing. And in that aspect, we're going to be pumping, playing heart-pumping, synthwave, dark synthwave kind of thing to help
the
that
synthwave into their veins.
Yeah, I mean the heart pumping synthwave is going to get help get your heart pumping, along with the nail biting of the thing, and we're wanting to create this really exciting experience where you're really just super excited and super invested in it. At the same time, then we do the more mellow, music when you're like building your decks and all this other stuff where you're sitting down thinking and you're concentrating rather than being in the being in the zone kind of thing. So we want the zone music and we want the chill, I've got a long time to think about this music kind of thing.
Yeah, you need a synth rating. Now, I do need to get going in the next 10 to 15 minutes, but to get back to it, part, again, of when skill comes into the play, there you go, is that when you have players of equal skill, that kind of creates a different dynamic than when you have two players of different skill sets, different card sets. And why we see a lot of these games, even on the mobile side, get very fascinating to watch when you have two high-level players or two whales going at it. Because like we said, once everybody has access to everything, it now comes down to, how do I work all this stuff in? And that is infinitely a more interesting question than do I spend more money and I automatically win there?
Mm-hmm.
And another point I wanted to mention, and this goes back to what we were saying earlier about symmetry and asymmetrical design, is that part of the reason why skill throws a huge monkey wrench into this is that in the right hands, you can have abilities that may be just okay. Maybe they're just, maybe like a 4 out of 10 normally, could become god tier in the right hands. I think Chris mentioned Blitzcrank earlier, and that was my main in League of Legends, or Blitzcrank. And what Blitzcrank did was he had the Scorpion get over it strategy, get over here pool. So if you were good at aiming that, you could completely wreck the opposing team's formation and even pull their healer out of the way. That is incredibly powerful. It's very high utility.
Hold on a second, Josh.
What?
Get over here.
Oh, here we go again. My audience has no idea what's going on.
Only people on my stream know what's going on.
But that was counterbalanced by the fact that you had to manually aim that skill. It wasn't just, I click a button, character automatically comes over here. That would be completely broken in a game like League of Legends.
Mm-hmm.
But by balancing around that level of skill, it kind of softened the amount of utility that it provided. Because if you got good, you could be really great with Blitzcrank. If you weren't, you basically lose almost a half to 3/4 of that character's utility if you can't aim right.
Yeah. And to El Gordo's point about who I should hire, I've actually already hired Jonas Shivaranti, who was the one of the sound designers on Bloodstained Ritual of the Night.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And to Chris's point about the dynamic music, no, it's not dynamic music. It's music that, good music by, theory ramps up over time. Mm-hmm. So, it may be not it's not always complete ramp. It's like ramp and then decelerate, ramp, decelerate, ramp, decelerate kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I know, again, this is off topic, but I know they did something similar with Payday 2 with the music for that, and how the song would have those ramp up points when the police raid starts.
Yeah, this won't be dynamic. This will just be, you know, a song, but it'll be a song that, like most songs, ramp up over time, but, also ramp down at times, ramp up, ramp down. And, if the timing finds you right, maybe the ramp downs are when it's your opponent's turn and the ramps ups are on your turn kind of thing. Or maybe the inverse, kind of thing. Who knows? But it'll be non-dynamic songs, just regular songs, but it may feel like that. It may feel dynamic, or at least somewhat dynamic kind of thing, just because of the way natural music goes.
Yeah. So, to get back to kind of skill, when we say skill in this respect, it means different things based on the genre or on the gameplay itself. For instance, if we're talking about a game like Call of Duty or Rocket League from earlier, that if you are really good at nailing headshots or manipulating your car, suddenly your skill may be able to mitigate a good amount of any kind of abstraction or purchases. Again, Rocket League doesn't have that. I'm more referring to Call of Duty in that regard. But it again is a factor of how the design works. If I am the best, if I am the best machine gun user in your entire game, but all machine guns are capped at, let's say, 5 points of damage, and somebody can hit me with a shotgun for 900 points, the skill is kind of being overwhelmed by the gameplay or the abstraction itself.
Yeah,
and that can lead to issues.
Unless that machine gun fires like 500 times a second.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, then the shotgun's outgunned.
Yeah. And again, this is where, again, like the nightmare balance comes in, because we saw people complain, like, if you change a gun's fire rate by 1/10 of a second, that can mean a lot in competitive play.
Mm-hmm.
And like a more extreme example would be changing the cost of a card. Going from a 5 mana to a 6 mana or a 4 mana, that is monumental in some of these CCGs.
It could also be inconsequential, depending on what card it is.
Yep. Or how mana is generated.
Mm-hmm.
1 mana per turn is different than saying everyone gets, 20 mana every turn.
Yep.
And again, that is the joys of balancing and designing a game. I hope everyone doesn't get too many aneurysms by the end of the stream.
Oh, they're going to get all the aneurysms.
The cure, of course, is chocolate milk.
Yep. Chocolate milk is always a cure. It fixes everything. Got an incurable disease? Just drink some chocolate milk. Mm-hmm. You'll be fine. Yeah. Don't listen to us. We don't know anything about it.
But skill levels, and this is where things get very fascinating when we talk about high-level competitive play. Because we've seen competitive players, they will look for advantages on counters that are considered, lame or lower tier. Because if you can figure out that one perfect strategy, there you go. If you can figure out that one perfect strategy on, the E tier character that suddenly turns into A tier, and you play that like the right time in a tournament, that could win you the entire thing. Because nobody will have the chance to adapt, if we're in the grand finals of a tournament.
Yeah. You know what we need now? Mm-hmm. We need a milk CCG. Where you battle out which milk is better. You have your regular milk, you got your skim milk, you got your strawberry milk, and then there's all different kinds of strawberry milk. There's the ones that were made from powder, ones that were made from the liquid, ones that were store-bought, same thing with chocolate milk. There's the gourmet ones kind of thing. Those are like the ultra rares where they took up actual chocolate and cut it up, or actual strawberries, and made the chocolate milk or strawberry milk that way.
Hungry here.
And you battle out the battle of the milks.
And to Chris's point, yeah, I like trying to do experimental and weird stuff in my RPGs and such. I like buff, debuff classes, and rather than just pure damage like that. But I do need to get going in the next few minutes. So regarding skill, when it comes to symmetry or just balance in general. Any point you want to bring up, Shark?
I think, I personally think that, if you're playing a multiplayer game, skill should be the main thing that affects the outcome of battle. It shouldn't be, what units they own, what cards they own, or whatever. I mean, that should certainly be an aspect to it because, strategy is, of course, limited by the amount of choices you have to strategize in. It's like a difference between, MacGyver having a string, a balloon, and a paperclip and being able to make a bomb out of it versus somebody else who just makes a pop balloon out of it, where, or having, like an armored tank and then, MacGyver can just get in it and just, shoot people kind of thing. And, somebody with no skill can get in there and shoot people. So, like, I think that, that you need to be skill focused when you're going to this kind of thing. And, it's very, very hard to do that kind of thing because, powers, especially when you're doing an asymmetrical balance, because it may be a whole bunch of powers that seem really, benign kind of thing. But then,
in the hands of somebody who's really good, could break your game. And that's another thing. We mentioned this earlier, but I think it needs to be mentioned again here. How easy is it to pull off these overpowered and very, outlandish strategies? If I can do something that wins the game 90% of the time and I don't even have to think about it, that may be too much. Conversely, if you have some like super crazy, like one like those, Yu-Gi-Oh! Hard the cards, insane strategy they throw on the show, but let's say it requires, the stars to be perfectly aligned for that to happen, that may not be so bad. It reminds me of when I saw with Edmund McMillan about the Binding of Isaac. He basically said, I don't care about balancing these options because he wanted everything to just kind of, like the perfect hodgepodge of abilities. So sometimes you get that game-breaking build that the whole run of Binding of Isaac is easy as hell. Sometimes you get that run that is horrible and, you're going to barely get through the end. And just like that, sometimes you get that run where the one stage before the final boss, you get that one god tier item that completely changes your entire strategy. And what you want is for your game to have that variety to it. It's what we liked about Monster Train, like going back to single player, for instance, that it is asymmetrically balanced. You have those different champions, you have the different factions, and you have those cars and artifacts in between them. And the beauty of the game is that the ultimate goal of Monster Train, as with the Spire, is to do damage. If you can't do damage, you can't beat enemies. If you can't beat enemies, you're not going to win the boss. How you achieve that is different each time you play. And that's where we get into those interesting dynamics. That if I'm playing as the faction in Monster Train that does the spike damage, that's a kind of damage. It's not the same as if I was playing as the faction that the Candle one, that they bring their units back. They do damage, I do damage, but it's different kinds. And how you use it and how you figure all this stuff out is where those dynamics come into play. And again, where it's balanced by the fact that it's not perfectly balanced. That there is no god tier 100% chance win. Conversely, there is no 0 chance never take this option.
Yeah, I still remember one of my early games of Monster Train to where I came up with one of the most broken combinations ever because like I killed that final boss like 5 or 6 turns before he was even summoned onto the field.
Yeah, and you will have those. If your game is right, you'll have those, variants, wild swings. And when they work like that, the player feels like they're a genius. They feel like they just played 5-dimensional chess and won. And when you have those, you may not want to nerf it. If you have a broken build, but it requires 7 exact things to happen, maybe just leave that in. It's like a fun little reward that you had that perfect alignment, that one run, and know that chances are you're not going to get that for a very long time.
Yeah, I haven't been able to recreate that run ever yet.
Mm-hmm. Like when I played a gunfire again, I don't know if we're going to get that broken strategy again. I would like to, but just with that said, I would like to find other strategies and figure them out.
And break them.
Exactly, and then drink chocolate milk as victory.
Exactly.
But I think that is a good point to wrap things up with. So we don't know what our topic will be for next week. If you'd like to discuss this one or offer some advice on chocolate milk or balance, be sure to join our respective Discords. You'll find them in the description down below.
Also, if you want to drink some chocolate milk, join our Discord. Because, we're not providing chocolate milk, but we're providing a place where you can drink the chocolate milk.
A chocolate milk, a BYOCM.
Yeah, there we go.
If you want to follow us on Twitter, I am on there as GW Bicer.
And I'm on there as Nexus Games LLC 1.
Mm-hmm. And you'll find links down below.
And you might find some chocolate milk pictures on our Twitter.
And will 50-50 work, or maybe more, what do you think, 60-40?
We need more chocolate than milk.
Yeah.
But we can't forsake the milk at the same time. So probably 51-49.
I will be back later tonight for my regular game streams. And if you want to catch our show where we review indie store pages, that is Thursdays starting around 3:30. And the City Extreme casts are held live Sundays at around 4:30 ET.
And of course, you can follow my channel and see both of those, as well as see my development of Neon Continuum and watch me make all the neons and try to balance the card game continually.
All right. And again, tune in this Tuesday around 7:30 for our roundtable discussion. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of you are in science of games. And thank you again, Nobody, for the super chat. I really do appreciate it. So, with that said, have a great rest of your Sunday, and we will see you next time. Take care.
See ya.